cancer diagnosis at the age of 32, my mom and I talked a lot about the shock of that diagnosis, given several doctors told us you're too young to have endometrial cancer. After much discussion, we began to feel driven to inform and help educate other young women about what symptoms they should be concerned.
Having both been teachers, it seemed natural for us to look for a way to share Alex's cancer journey in order to help other young women avoid such a shocking diagnosis or possibly navigate a similar path. A podcast seemed the best way to get the word out, and that's how Down There Aware was born.
4 years later, our mother-daughter duo has gone from educating and informing to advocacy and action, with a fresh and sometimes very interesting and somewhat humorous multi-generational perspective.
We look forward to sharing with you Season 4 as we advocate, take action, and make it a priority to always be Down There Aware.
Welcome back to another episode of Down There Aware. I'm Alex.
And I'm Mary, Alex's mama.
It's been a little bit since we've done that, so I thought it would be fun. Thanks for joining us. We are into March 2023.
Almost. Oh yeah, we are.
This will be released in March. Sometimes you have to think ahead because we've been doing really good recording ahead of time and not at midnight the night before we were going to launch at 9 a.m. Not that we ever did that. But yeah, so we are here, and if you are new joining us, thank you. We're so excited to have you as a listener, and we hope that we can give you some entertainment, a little bit of knowledge, some confidence to be an advocate for yourself and for others.
That's the most important.
That is the most important thing. So, yeah, but in 10 days from now, less than a week from when you're listening, we will be on a jet plane.
Leaving on a jet plane.
Yeah. Headed to Deutschland.
Yeah.
Going to Germany. So, quick, if you didn't know, my dad was born in Germany. He's a military brat, and he lived there for a few years, and we've always wanted to go back, and we planned this trip in 2020.
And shout out to Herr Michael Simmons, who was my middle and high school German teacher, and also went to church with our family.
And was also your foster dad for 6 months or something.
Yeah, for me to finish my sophomore year after my parents moved to Alabama. Just an awesome couple, and I fell in love with the German language just because he made it so much fun.
And didn't he also make you speak German only in the house, or at dinners or something?
He tried to kind of immerse me, and I was not good.
That's like me. I'll come in and say, yesterday I brought mom and dad breakfast. I had to run an errand and I was out anyway, and so I walked in and I said, "Ich brauche ein Frühstück,"
which means
I need breakfast. And they looked at me like, "What? Like, you're coming over because you want us to cook for you? Like, what's going on?"
Aber du bringst.
And I was like, "Oh, I said the wrong BR word." Yeah. So it's hard learning a language in your 30s.
We're still learning. I wish I had kept up with it, but I did take some more in college. Had a great German teacher in college and cannot remember his name, but we had a great time. A lot of my friends took it too because they needed a language, and we just decided to all take together, and that was fun. We would tell jokes in German, in pseudo-German. We were so bad, and we would just make up words, and that was kind of a fun thing to do.
Yeah. So we're going to be gone for 2 whole weeks, and it really interferes with 4 weeks of recording just because of we're taking Sadie to hang out with my brother for those 2 weeks, and then we get back in the middle of the week, the day before an episode needs to come out. So we just said, what is a series that we can put together, record ahead of time, and still put out really great content every week? Because we did an experiment last year every other week, and it was interesting, but every week is kind of our jam. So we thought, let's look at world statistics. So we're going to break the world up into pseudo regions that are typically kind of lumped together. We are not geography professionals.
I'm the worst.
We probably will say something wrong in terms of this country is in this region or whatever. So don't come for us about that. But we will do our best to be as accurate as possible.
Yeah, the real purpose is to compare data from different regions, and we have found some interesting things.
We have, and I'm glad you said the D word. So she's like, what did I say?
I'm gonna go back in my mind.
Data.
Oh.
Because these episodes might be a little denser than some of our other episodes, but because we now have the YouTube channel and we're doing this on video, I'm going to do my best to add some graphics up on the screen as we're talking about them. So if there's a chart that we're talking about or something that we're speaking to a region or a map or something, you can get a visual there. So if you heard that, there will be things. If I cut it out, you'll never know.
The magic of editing.
The magic of editing. Trust me, there's a lot that gets edited out. But because these are going to be kind of dense with data a little bit, we'll try to make them less than need or as much as needed. But we do have some terms that I think we should kind of go over because I had to look them up.
I did too.
And I took statistics in high school and in college and in grad school, and still had to look some stuff up because I'm not immersed in it every day.
Well, and I took statistics in grad school and I hated it.
And I'm the weirdo that loved it. So.
I'm just not a numbers person. Alex is. She gets that from her father. It kind of weighs me down. Numbers kind of weigh me down. I understand the importance of them, and in this series, the next several episodes, there are some frightening numbers, really.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember too is to not get bogged down by the actual numbers and the actual data points, but to think holistically of trends or comparing, this country to that country and that region to this region, in terms of, all of the outcomes and stats like that. So the first term I came across and I was like, what is that? was ASR or ASIR, and that's age-standardized rate or age-standardized incident rate.
This is editing, Alex, popping in to say that I'm about to say something incorrect. So I wanted to cut that noise and bring you the real definition of ASR or ASIR, which is the age standardized incidence rate. So here that is. The age standardized incidence rate, or ASIR, is a weighted average based on a standard population of the number of new cases of cancer per 100,000 people in a 5-year age group. Diagnosed during a year divided by the total number of people in that age group that year. Age standardized rates give the rate that would occur if the population of interest had the same age distribution as a given standard population. So when we talk about ASIR in terms of the world population, there is a world ASR rate and algorithm, that's not the right word, but equation that scientists use, and that's how they average it. So you are more comparing apples to apples when you're comparing like Zimbabwe to Russia, because we know their populations are different. But if we standardize the population, then you can look and compare the two relatively equally. So you're welcome for popping in and interrupting, but thank you for allowing us to be human, make mistakes, and correct ourselves when we're wrong. To the rest of the episode.
And the ASR allows the comparison of the rates that are arithmetically adjusted to have the same age structure as the standard population. So it's just all about kind of making the playing field even and making sure that age is not a factor in those comparisons. So I thought that was interesting. Another term that I had not heard, so we've all heard the term GDP. Still, I'm a numbers person, but I'm not a finance person. So like, I know what GDP is, but I don't get it. But there's something else called HDI. Have you heard of this?
I haven't heard of HDI.
It's not HDTV.
Yeah.
Or HDMI. But it's the Human Development Index. And it was something that world leaders put together and said that measuring a country's wealth is not the only measure of the country. And so they are looking at the human component of those countries. And so...
Well, how smart.
I mean, it makes perfect sense.
Just
particularly when you're looking at health and when you're
Yes.
looking at cancer and you're looking at, all those things. So I was like, duh. Why are we doing that? But it's interesting. So it's a summary measure of average achievement in key dimensions of human development, or they're living in huts, or like, at what point, what are the actual facts and measurable things. So that's something. And then the last one was fun to Google, because if you are on any form of social media, I think you've heard of this in a different area, but ASMR, that's the whole like, I'm whispering, like I'm making like noises, right? Like people do opening containers and things like that. But in statistics, hello Sadie, in statistics, it's an age-specific mortality rate, and it's just limited to a particular age group. So instead of saying our entire population, this is the mortality rate, well, if you're looking at older people versus younger people, so that also, much like our first data point, the ASR, or the ASIR, does the same thing. It just kind of averages out that age factor. So I thought that was interesting. So those are some terms you might hear over the next few weeks. All of this information we're going to put on our website. So there are links to all of our research. There will be definitions of things. So you'll see all of that if you go check out our show notes on the website.
I'm trying to keep Sadie's tail from hitting the mic. The cord. Sadie, lay
Can
down.
you lay down, please?
Down. Sadie, down.
She's like, no.
Sadie Mae, down.
She's not the best listener.
Down. Good girl.
Good girl.
Good girl. But do it for longer. Down. Down.
And just for everybody wondering, she has been out, she has been fed, she's been given TREATs.
But she wants attention.
She wants attention. So we did talk that in a future episode that we might shake it up and record on my couch with Sadie sitting with us. I thought that would be a fun little change. So so those are the three terms, statistic type things that I thought we should be introduced to before we kind of dig into the numbers and the data and all of that.
And I think we're going to talk in the beginning about some world statistics. And
yeah, I think it's a good place to start and have, holistically what we're looking at. And I found, happenstance, a really great resource, I think. It's called the Cancer Atlas. It's a website and a book, and it was produced by 3 different agencies that came together. So the American Cancer Society, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, and the Union for International Cancer Control. And so their aim is to increase knowledge and provide a reliable basis for evidence-based decision-making and to inspire united action and partnerships against the cancer epidemic.
And I will throw this out there. Alex and I did separate research, so most of what we're talking about today we're each finding out for, the first time. which that's kind of fun too. So
we thought that would be a little more interesting than us just kind of reading statistics.
Because then
have
we
some
have
conversation.
Reaction. So.
Yeah. So where do you want to start, Mama?
Well, as far as world statistics, I don't have a lot. I really concentrated on endometrial cancer for obvious reasons.
What could that obviously be? Just kidding.
And so the only thing I really will start with is some data about endometrial cancer. It was interesting to me that endometrial cancer is the 6th most commonly occurring cancer in women and the 15th most common cancer overall. I mean, 6th most common in women.
Yeah, that's interesting because it seems like, at least what we know about U.S. statistics, that it has a pretty low incidence rate compared to other cancers.
And in 2020, there were more than 417,000 new cases of endometrial cancer.
Wow.
Also, there's a table, and we'll put this up on the website, that gives some specifics. Poland had the highest rate of endometrial cancer in women in 2020, followed by Lithuania. So the highest rate, Poland was first, Lithuania was second, Samoa was third, Belarus was fourth, Jamaica fifth, Ukraine sixth, North Macedonia seventh, Bahamas eighth, U.S. was ninth. That's the highest rate of endometrial cancer. The United States was ninth, and Trinidad and Tobago were 10th.
Wow. I think it's interesting when you start pulling out different countries because, I think some people want to jump to, well, what's the healthcare like, right? Like,
right.
Is it universal healthcare? Is there an insurance, private insurance? Is there this? Is there that? And I think that's a part of it, but I think there's so much more to it. It really interests me. Poland was first?
Yeah.
Like why, right?
Well, but the other part of that chart is the rates of endometrial cancer mortality. So when we go to that chart, the Bahamas was first. Now they were 8th in the rate of women being diagnosed with endometrial cancer, but they were first in mortality from endometrial cancer.
Well, and this is very anecdotal, and a single person who was on the island for a few hours during a cruise, but I could see how it's a impoverished country. If you don't leave the little port where your cruise docks up, if you don't venture into town like we did, you really don't see it. But the roads were demolished, people were walking barefoot everywhere, and granted it's an island country, but you could definitely see the poverty around you.
Well, and in looking at the rankings, I'll just read them. This is the rate of endometrial cancer mortality in 2020. 1 was Bahamas, 2 Jamaica, 3 Trinidad and Tobago, 4 Samoa, 5 Montenegro, 6 Barbados, 7 Cuba, 8 Latvia, 9 Georgia, and 10 Fiji. So really just...
With the exception of Latvia, Montenegro, and Georgia, all the rest are island nations.
Exactly. And the others are Eastern European nations, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we get there.
Yeah, we'll have a whole episode about Europe. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Because, you automatically think, well, access to healthcare in a small island nation, they may not have cancer centers, and they may have to travel abroad to, go get treatment. And what's interesting is we know that endometrial cancer is one of the slower growing, less deadly compared to other cancers, pretty treatable, pretty curable. So yeah, that is fascinating.
And what also might come into play is medical technology in regard to testing. Like if there are some strange symptoms, are they viewed as strange symptoms? And if so, what is the next step to do any kind of evaluation? And maybe that capability isn't there in the island nations.
Well, and what we know from about this time last year, we were talking about the Conquering Cancer campaign that our friends in Australia are really spearheading with the World Health Organization, is that there's a stigma around feminine cancers or feminine symptoms or even just getting tested or having a screening. It's seen as being dirty or inappropriate, to have a medical professional test and examine. So I wonder if that is, because that was a different part of the world, I wonder if that is similar in these island nations.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think that's the thing with numbers and the data and that part of the information we get. We don't always get the why. And to me, I'm more interested in the why than the numbers. But I guess the why, you have questions about the numbers, and that's why you want to know the why.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have to know the data in order to ask the right questions,
right,
and then determine the why. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, so my worldwide research, say that 3 times fast, more focused just on holistic cancer issues and things. And I found this statistic really interesting. Considering both sexes, men and women, either female breast, prostate, or cervical cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer in over 70% of countries.
Wow. Female breast, prostate, and cervical. Well, there are definitive tests for all of those.
And I think that that's part of it, is that we, and you'll see later when we dig a little bit deeper, that testing, the prevalence of testing really changes the game.
Yeah.
And so it might look like rates increased dramatically over time, but really, did the rate increase or did our awareness of it increase just because
of the test results? Yeah, and I think maybe that's kind of my kind of negative about data, because there are so many variables like that, like I think we said maybe even last week, figures don't lie, but liars do figure. And you know, things can be twisted, and maybe not even intentionally,
right?
But because of all those variables, the numbers aren't really accurate.
Yeah, it's, and it's hard to account for all of those variables.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's one of the things you learn in the scientific method, right? Is one variable, but really, can you whittle it down to just having one variable if on that scale, on a worldwide scale?
But that's the first thing I thought when you named those three. That, we can test definitively,
right,
for all of those.
And a lot of them have preventative screening processes, which is huge. And you'll see that in these next few episodes, that a trend is when cancer can be screened for, the mortality rate goes down and the incident rate goes up.
Yeah.
And which is expected when you have that. I also found it interesting that each year, more than 2 million women worldwide are diagnosed with either breast cancer or cervical cancer.
Every year? 2 million?
2 million every year worldwide.
Wow.
But where a woman lives largely determines whether she will be, she will develop one of the cancers, if she has access to timely and effective diagnostic and treatment services, and ultimately survive. So again, it really depends on where you live if you're going to be able to get this. Are you having an annual mammogram? Are you having, or 5 years or whatever the new, standard is, are you having an annual pap smear? Is that something your country recommends or requires, or, it just depends.
Or is there enough information out there that even if your country doesn't require it, do you even know that's what you need to be doing?
Right. Yeah. Because, I think a lot of people, myself included, you trust the professionals in their profession. And so, like, I don't take my car to the shop and tell them what's wrong with it. I actually did do that the last time because my dad diagnosed it, and I took it in and I said, yeah, I think this is going on. And he called me back and he's like, well, you were spot on. I was like, yeah, it was not me. But I don't go to the doctor and say, I have blah, blah, blah. Like, you
tell him your symptoms.
I tell him my symptoms, tell him how I'm feeling, and then I trust that his book of knowledge then takes those symptoms and other things that he observes that I may not be able to tell him and puts it into a diagnosis, or says we need to run these tests because I need more information to then give you a diagnosis. And if doctors aren't recommending or telling people like, hey, you need to get this test done, you need to have a pap smear every year, you need to do this, then they don't know, and they don't know what they don't know, and it's not their fault. So that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
So this was interesting to me, kind of projecting. A lot of the projections now are looking at into 2040. So 17 years from now. But based on population growth and aging, the global cancer burden will grow to 29.4 million cases annually by the year 2040. And that's assuming that global rates of change, they use the global rate of change from 2018 to predict this. So if that remains unchanged, that's where we'll be in 2040.
Well, and hopefully that will not remain unchanged. There's so much cancer research going on right now, and I hear about, in fact, I just heard this morning, we're going to talk about this on another episode, but I heard some really encouraging information about some possible new cancer treatments. So hopefully there's going to be a breakthrough. We've come a long, long way in diagnosing, treating, curing even. So hopefully that's going to continue.
Yeah.
Especially with medical technology advancement.
Well, and talk about medical technology. We have an episode in the works that we're going to interview some really, really cool people about their medical technology devices and treatments, and it just blows my mind. Like, I'm not smart enough to understand all this information. And literally, like, when I was on the initial call with the guy, like, just my jaw was on the floor, and I was like, what? That's so cool. So we're really pumped about that. But this is a positive. We've talked about a lot of doom and gloom. We're going to get 29.4 million cases per year and all these, these terrible things. But did you know that the incidence rate of cervical cancer has decreased by more than 50% or more in many high-income countries following the introduction of screening with the Pap test in the 1960s?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. And that is very encouraging. The Pap smear has done wonders in people being diagnosed very early on, even before it turned to cancer. They called it pre-cancer, or they called it abnormal cells, and that's all due to the Pap test. So that's a perfect example.
It is. And again, calling back to our Friends with the Conquering Cancer campaign, that's their goal, is to have, all of these women in these low-income countries have access to testing. Because if you can get tested, and in addition to that, if you can get the vaccine, you're really well off considering, the previous rates in those countries.
Those two things could do away with cervical cancer.
Well, and that's their goal, the eradication of cervical cancer, which is just incredible. And they are still, you can still get tickets to watch the documentary if you want. They're only $5. Every penny of that goes back to the organization to help them with their mission of eradicating cervical cancer. So that is also on the website.
And for all the cancer, we say, oh, this is so sad. Why can't we do anything? Why isn't there more research? I mean, for all the cancers where that happens and that's the conversation, this is not one of them. Cervical cancer is definitely on a road to being eradicated.
Yep. So, overall, so that's our holistic worldview. But, it's important prevention, screening, all of those things. We see how that impacts statistics the most. And, you can look at charts and, like we just said, with cervical cancer in high-income countries. Well, why is it in high-income countries that's different than low-income countries? It's because there's access to those screenings and preventative care and knowledge about, abnormal symptoms and things like that.
Yeah.
That when you're worried about where your next meal is going to come from, or if the water you're drinking is clean, bleeding is not a concern. Bloating is not a concern, right? You have other things to worry about. So that is definitely why that varies between countries.
And that goes back to our focus on putting labeling on feminine hygiene products, and we talked about that in another episode, and we'll be talking about that some more. Just getting the word out there, information for people.
Yeah, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
All right, so now we've covered our statistics lesson and we've done our world stats. Let's jump into our first region, which interestingly enough was a little hard to find some facts about, even though it's one of the largest populations in the world. So we're going to start in Asia. And again, all of these links and things to stats and charts and whatever are going to be on the website. So did you know that China has the highest liver cancer incidence rate in the world?
Wow, liver cancer.
Yep, liver cancer.
Again, I'm thinking, why?
Why? Right. Well, they have some information as to why. But rates are now decreasing due to programs for prevention of aflatoxin exposure.
And where does that come from?
That's a really good question. I don't know.
Google.
I'm going to Google it. But also, the familial transmission of hepatitis B.
Ooh.
So that was, something that was happening. But they've seen it decrease recently.
So maybe they're figuring that out.
Let's see. Aflatoxin. It's a family of toxins produced by certain fungi that are found on agricultural crops such as corn, peanuts, cottonseed, and tree nuts. So if you think about it, a lot of people in Asia are farmers.
Yeah.
We get a lot of our produce, exported from China and other Asian countries. And they just have a lot of farmland. I mean, Asia's huge. They have a ton of farmland. So maybe that toxin being in the soil can infiltrate the water system. And I mean, it has to be something far-reaching like that. Right.
To have that statistic. What was it again? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
It's okay. It just has the highest liver cancer incidence rate in the world. But this probably, in 2020, in all of Asia, the top 3 cancers were lung, breast, and colorectal. Now, breast cancer, we've seen in almost all of my research, breast cancer's in the top 1, 2, or 3. It's very high. But in lung, I can see, again, I've been to China, and so I don't want to speak for all of Asia, but it's very condensed. The air is very polluted in general. So lung cancer doesn't really surprise me. They also have a really high rate of smoking.
Yeah.
A lot of people smoke there. So, but colorectal surprised me.
Yeah. It also surprises me that China has the highest rate of liver cancer in the world, yet in all of Asia,
Liver's not even in the top 3.
And, China's a chunk of Asia, so that is kind of surprising.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we did this.
I know, it's fascinating. And so there was a wide geographic variation in cancer burden when compared with cancer figures from other continents. So comparing Asia to other regions. So for example, prostate cancer was one of the top 3 cancers in North America and Oceania, so like Polynesia and that area, while it only ranked 8th in Asia. So again, it makes me wonder, is that we test more, or there really is just a higher rate for whatever reason? Are certain people, certain groups of people genetically predisposed to various cancers? Like we see in other diseases.
Ashkenazi Jewish people
are predisposition to certain diseases. We know people with African descent are predisposed to like sickle cell and things like that. So does that happen with cancer? I don't know.
Well, and I wonder, like with prostate cancer, I believe, now we'd have to look this up to know for sure, but I believe that the likelihood of being diagnosed with prostate cancer is if you're an older male. So the places where it's more prevalent, do those people have a longer life expectancy?
Well, that's true too.
That's another, talk about the variables in the data.
Right. We just don't know.
Yeah.
This was interesting to me. In the past decade, there was a great regional difference. So in Asia, but regionally different in the cancer incidence trends across the whole region of Asia. So Korea and Japan had increasing incidence trends of cancer, while the Philippines, and they include Israel in this, had decreasing trends in both sexes.
Of all cancers.
Of all cancers, just overall. So, and they do think that, so cancer in Korea increased from 1999 to 2018 by 27.5%. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's quite a lot. And then in Japan, all cancers increased. Now this is between 1985 and 2010. All cancers increased at that time. None of them went down in Japan. And think about Japan, lots of technology, high GDP. Like it's a high income country. So it's not what we're talking about in those other island nations. So so that kind of makes you wonder. There was a reduction in cancer between Israeli Jews and the Philippines, though. So while Korea and Japan had increasing rates, Israeli Jews and the Philippines, they had decreasing rates. Which, again, it just, it's kind of one of those things where you just look at it and you're like, I wonder why. Now, this was interesting to me, and I'll just read it and let you know. So, overdiagnosis of some cancers, like thyroid cancer, could be one reason for the increasing trend of cancer, especially in Korea. Now, when I hear the word overdiagnosis, it makes me think misdiagnosis. Yeah. It was diagnosed, but we didn't, it wasn't quite cancer, it was pre-cancer.
Or we said this is what it was, but after testing it
wasn't. Yeah. But it goes on to say, it was reported that due to improvement of diagnostic techniques and widespread implementation of screening programs, more thyroid lesions caused by asymptomatic and non-lethal thyroid diseases were increasingly detected in Korea. As a consequence, the incidence of thyroid cancer surged significantly by 15-fold.
Wow.
During 1993 and 2011. So, again, is it that because we're doing all these tests and we're finding these non-lethal, non-cancerous masses or changes in thyroid, that we're also finding cancer? Or are we calling these non-lethal changes and diagnoses in thyroid cancer? Are we including those? I don't know.
Or were they included, and then when it was definitively tested and found not to be cancer, there wasn't a correction in, the original data.
So again,
see, this is why numbers,
it just brings up a lot more questions.
Yes.
And finally, so kind of bringing it back to Down There Aware, there was noticeably an increasing trend of cancer incidence among female and younger populations in Asia for the past 10 years. Rising trends may be mainly driven by the increasing incidence in breast, thyroid, and lung cancers. Specifically, breast cancer has increased among Asia-Pacific females aged 20 to 49 between 2004 and 2013.
Wow. 20 to 49.
Right, which is, I mean, and we talk about it all the time. We see people who are very young being diagnosed, and their doctor said, oh, you couldn't be diagnosed, you were too young. Sounds familiar. But it's happening all over the world.
Yeah.
And also, there was an increase in cancer incidence in Japanese females from 1985 to 2010, and that was mostly breast and thyroid. So again, the thyroid might speak to all of these new testing programs that they have, that they have really dug into thyroid testing. But yeah, it really just kind of blows my mind when I think about it. And I think it also helps bring commonality. Like, we're all dealing with cancer. It's something that is universal. It's not something that is just us here. Everybody's dealing with it.
And wouldn't it be great if all the great scientific minds could get together and change the world by finding cures?
Yeah. Some groups are trying.
And I do think that's happening to some measure anyway. I'm not sure exactly how much, but...
Yeah. So that was a little bit about our world and Asia specifically, and kind of their cancer trends. Stay tuned for the next 4 weeks. After this week, we will bring additional regions to talk about their cancer statistics. And FYI, we're filming these all on the same day. So yes, we will be in the same clothes. And yes,
Sadie will be in and
out, and it'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
We'll all live. So thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. And again, all of the charts you saw and statistics, and again, lots and lots of numbers, we'll put all of that on our website. All the links if you really want to dig down into the studies. That's one of the cool things I will say. Information is so readily available.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, full published studies with all of their data, all of their methodology, everything, all of their results, just in PDF form. You can go find it. And again, it takes some digging, it takes some time, and you do have, I mean, I had multiple tabs open when I was doing all this research, because it was, okay, this is the study, but what does this mean? And what is this term? And what is this, and then even I would look up like a map of, okay, well, what does this region look like? And so you can do it if you want to, but we'll give you a little shortcut with all of the links that we need.
Kind of the highlights.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Down There Aware. Be sure to like and subscribe on our new YouTube channel, as well as on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us at Down There Aware on all social media sites: Twitter, Pinterest, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. If you have it, we're there at Down There Aware. You can learn more on our website, www.downthereaware.com, and always get in touch with us, downthereaware@gmail.com. See you next week.